Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's event featuring an impressive lineup of guests discussing NFTs. Welcome to the metaverse. After a very successful event on SPACs back in December, we're really excited to bring together some of the best minds in the NFT market and talk more about the explosion of activity, awareness, and interest that we're all seeing in NFTs and the metaverse. My name is Donna Rapiccioli, and I'm the Dean of Fordham's Gabelli School of Business. For those of you who haven't joined us before, the Gabelli School has joined with the Museum of American Finance to connect audiences in an impressive way to hear from global thought leaders. Events like this one bring together authors, historians, and other key figures throughout the world of finance for informative and enlightening discussions, and we are tremendously proud of our dynamic partnership with the museum. And now it truly is my pleasure to hand things over to my friend and colleague, David Cowan, President and CEO of the Museum of American Finance.
Thanks, Dean Donna, and it's always great to be back with all our friends at Fordham and the Gabelli School in this wonderful and long partnership. So welcome to the metaverse to some over 500 of you who have signed up for this program. But first and foremost is to acknowledge our sponsor, because we can't go on with these type of wonderful programs without one. And tonight it is the OLB Group, which is a diversified fintech e-commerce services provider whose platform delivers cloud-based merchant services to more than 10,500 merchants nationwide. And through their wholly owned sub Demint, they're engaged in crypto Bitcoin mining, utilizing sustainable natural gas, deploying some 1,000 state-of-the-art computers. And it is my pleasure now to introduce the chairman and CEO of OLB Group, Ronnie Yakov.
Thank you, David. As a founder and CEO of the OLB Group, we are proud to partner with the Museum of American Finance, and we are honored to be the sponsor of this event. NFTs, welcome to the metaverse. NFTs are exciting innovation, exciting partly because their current use of artwork and collectibles, but mostly their potential as utilities. Now, a few words about OLB Group. We are a fintech company providing products and services and accumulating digital assets. Our yearly run rate in transaction volume is $1.3 billion, and that is over 28 million transactions. We have over 10,000 merchants on all 50 states. OLB Group has six wholly owned subsidiaries that are in payment and merchant services, omni-commerce platforms, crowdfunding platforms, and Bitcoin mining. OLB is in the process of developing NFT ticketing solutions that includes loyalty, merchandising, and gift and rewards that we will complement the existing digital assets that we have. With saying that, I would like to turn back the stage to David.
Thanks, Ronnie. Thanks again for OLB's wonderful sponsorship. I'd also like to acknowledge the participation tonight of the Financial Executives Networking Group, whose members are joining us. Now, for some of our guests, this might be your first introduction to the Museum of American Finance, and tonight's program is emblematic of the museum's mission, which is to educate the public on the history, the current state, and the future of the financial markets and their importance in the role as a driver of our economy. Now, this program, as mentioned before, is building on multiple other programs we've held on crypto and blockchain and SPACs. And if you want to see any of those programs, you go to our website and just go to Event Archive. Now, for those of you a little less familiar with NFTs, which are non-fungible tokens, they're typically packaged as digital collectibles, works of art, music, video games, video game items, concert tickets, or pretty much anything that you can think of. The NFT market is growing rapidly and is currently exceeding $27 billion. Now, our panel discussion will be moderated by Michael Maloney, adjunct professor at Fordham Law and the Wharton School of Business. And there he teaches about Bitcoin and digital asset regulation. He's been very active in digital currency and blockchain technology since 2000 2011, and that includes previously being the CFO for Coinmint. Most recently, he founded Royale, a blockchain infrastructure and fund company with the round led by GTS. Now, he's going to be in discussion with 4 different experts from around the country and around the world. Their complete bios are on our websites, but I'm going to give you a quick thumbnail sketch. Michael Amar is a serial entrepreneur and investor. He's co-founded multiple companies in France, Israel, and the Silicon Valley, including iFeelGoods, a leading digital rewards platform, and Chain of Events, which is the publisher of the Paris Blockchain Week Summit and Paris NFT Day, which are coming up on April 12th to 14th. Our second panelist is Benjamin Cole, PhD, and he holds the Loesch Chair in Entrepreneurship and is a professor of strategy at Fordham's Gabelli School of Business, and where he's garnered many teaching awards for excellence. He has spearheaded the Gabelli School's secondary concentration in blockchain and organized the Blockchain Disruptor Conference. Dr. Cole is an elected fellow of the British Blockchain Association. Our third panelist is Devika Kornbacher, and she is a technology transactions and intellectual property partner at Vincent & Elkins LLP. And there she advises on technology-related legal matters and all aspects of intellectual property rights, as well as leading B&E's cybersecurity and data privacy practice and the firm's technology transaction team. And then our fourth and final panelist is James Rao. He goes by Jim. He's the founder and managing partner of Venturo Capital LLC, which is a middle market traditional and alternative investment bank that's located and based in Houston. He's the co-founder of Liberty Exchange, a new non-US crypto, NFT, and securities alternatives exchange, which is launching in March. Jim has 30 plus experience in capital raising and deal structuring, and interestingly, arranged funding for one of the first security token offerings in the US and the first NFT as a security offering. Now, before I turn it over to Michael to get started, we want to remind you that there will be a Q&A part to this. So please make sure you put your question not in chat, but in the question line below. And with that, let's get started with NFTs in the metaverse. It's all yours, Michael.
Okay. Thank you very much, David, and welcome to the panelists here. It's great to be virtually online with everyone, but let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to just say right off the bat, let's start with a high-level example of what are NFTs. I want to hand that over to you, Michael. Oh, Michael Marr?
Yeah, sorry, couldn't hear you.
Sorry, not a problem. Hand it off to you. If you could just briefly describe NFTs. Oh. Michael, can you hear us?
Yes, sorry,
okay.
I cannot hear you.
I don't think he can hear us. So you know what, Ben, I'm going to take it to you.
Can you hear me?
Now we can, yes.
Okay, sorry about that. So
No
NFTs and what they are important for brands. You know, like crypto was a promise to bank the unbanked, I think NFTs are a chance for the creators. I'll give you 2 examples. Let's say you're an artist in Africa. What is the chance and the odds that you're going to be, selected by a gallery in Paris, London, or New York? It's close to 0. But now you can draw something on your phone, upload it on OpenSea, which is like the Amazon for NFTs, which, by the way, will take only a 15% commission against the gallery's 50%. And if someone likes the art and is going to buy it for $500 nice. But then if someone else buys it from that person for $5,000, it's even better, because actually the initial creator will get lifetime royalties on every sale that will be made with this art. So it's opening the gates for creators to get access to mass market. That's one thing. But if you take an extreme opposite example, which will be for a luxury brand, let's say one of the major ones, they own 20% of the luxury market. What is their percentage or market share for the secondary hand? 0, right? They don't get nothing. I do believe, like a lot of people, and obviously the new generation, that most people will buy very expensive digital collectibles. And in this case, the Gucci handbag, the virtual Gucci handbag that you can, wear on your metaverse with your avatar, is actually going to be sold and resold many times. And each time the creator, the brand, Gucci in this example, will keep get his commission. So one of the promises of NFT is to give the creator the real value of his creation. Picasso made money once when he was selling his painting, but actually what happened after, many people changed hands with it and he didn't get a dime for it. And just to summarize, NFT is part of what we call the Web3. So Web 1 was actually us reading a website. Web 2 is actually social media and engaging. And Web 3 is that we own it, we are participants of it. And I will just give a last example. A lot of people don't like Facebook today, but what if tomorrow you have Bookface, which have exactly the same features, but instead of imposing ads to you, will ask you, do you want ads or not? And if you say yes, you can get a rev share of that. And also you can, vote for their policy for fake news or the color change of their logo. This is what Web3 could be, is actually give the real value of what you're bringing to the table.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michael. I'm going to turn it over actually to Devika. Could you define what you're getting from an NFT and if there's any kind of precedent or legal precedent for that?
Sure. So, like Michael Amara said, the NFT from an art perspective is right, the art. You're not getting the copyright in the underlying work, because that's one of the debates that happen a lot with NFTs is like, what is it? I've got a lot of friends who are like, why in the world would I spend any money on what's basically a glorified GIF? I think I saw one of those questions, right? And it's because what you're getting is a set of rights underneath it. So you may not be getting the copyright in the underlying work, but you're getting the right to display it, right? As the NFT, you're getting the right to resell it on something like OpenSea or another marketplace. And that's, for some people, that's plenty. That's a big right to have. And so I think it's also the right to be able to have and this is the immutable, I know Benjamin will talk about this, but the immutable kind of spot on the blockchain to be able to trace the value that you don't have today. When I buy something and I sell it, this first sell doctrine under copyright law, it's gone. I have no right and can't trace it. But here you've got that NFT that goes on and on and on, and you can keep track of where it goes with the digital ID. So that's what you're owning. You're owning the right to say you own it and to display it.
So Ben, I want to turn it over to you for a quick, for how you see the industry. As Michael said, it's expanding beyond just art and into identity. How are you seeing brands start to use NFTs, and how is that going to expand that market?
Okay, so let me just say that I think that the blockchain space is very quirky in that these use cases that become very prevalent in the media come to kind of capture the imagination but limit what people see. Okay, so you think about Bitcoin. When Bitcoin first came out, it was a payment use. And so everyone thought that blockchain basically meant cryptocurrencies. And that is not true at all. And in fact, I have an entire course built around that. So the second thing is that a lot of people, what they're seeing is they're seeing just like JPEGs of apes and saying, yeah, you can right click on it. What exactly am I getting? And they think that that's what an NFT is. Okay, and that's also incorrect, right? I mean, we just heard a moment ago about how there's some underlying rights there, but an NFT can basically represent anything as an asset, right? Certainly it can represent an art asset, and if that art asset is then used in a video game, for example, does that create a royalty stream that goes back down to the original artist, right? But it can represent any number of different things, and we've seen a lot of experimentation right now. And certainly what we're seeing in this, what I call the gold rush, I think is communicating to a lot of people that it's just this kind of, I don't know, I've actually read some of the comments about, is this just like a Ponzi scheme? Is it just finding the next greatest fool to buy your lemon? Those types of things. And there's certainly, when you have this kind of gold rush, there are people who are going to buy something that could eventually be worthless, okay? But an NFT is not just something like a JPEG of an ape. Okay, it can represent a royalty stream. For example, go back to this example of an artist. Okay, so any type of content creator who creates something. So if I'm a martial artist and I create a martial arts sequence and motion capture, and then I allow that motion capture to be sold as something that could be used to make a Marvel movie, then that NFT actually can funnel royalty back to me as the original creator of that. So these types of things become possible when you're using NFTs. And I think that as people start to think about, okay, so what could happen in terms of branding? Well, consider, for example, the video game industry, right? So the video game industry, you've got an industry that's essentially revolves around aggregating talents of different creative types: musicians, motion capture people, texture artists, people who make stick figures and these types of things. All of those people don't have to be under the same roof. Moreover, you also have video game companies who have what I would call the Rembrandts in the attics. These are the old games, the legacy games that don't have enough fans today to justify trying to build a full-on game yourself, because it's not going to sell 5 million units, but there's still like 200,000 rabid fans out there who would love to be able to make a game. So if you actually incorporate NFTs into, for example, a gaming platform that allows these companies that have these assets, these franchises, they could actually get permission for other people to make games based off of that and make royalties coming in. And the ability to tap into things like franchises is not unlike what IBM did when it started looking at its portfolio of patents that were just sitting around in the file cabinet and said, hey, could we start licensing some of this stuff out? And by doing so, they actually came to have about 1/10 of all of their revenue coming from licensing patents that they themselves weren't developing into technology. So that goes straight to the top line. That's just free cash flow coming in from an existing asset, right? So this is a way that you can start to think about what NFTs can do for firms.
Already in the chat room. So the number one coming up, and I'm going to call on you, Jim, is how does someone go ahead and get an NFT? How do they purchase one, and possibly how do they mint them?
Well, that's those are two questions, but how do you get one? You can, well, let's start off how do you make one. That actually needs to be minted. So a lot of data is captured in that and put onto the blockchain, and it's captured in that form. And it can be done on a number of technologies. Many of them can be on Ethereum. Other blockchains are also used in the minting process. We ourselves work with about 4 groups that do the minting. We don't do the minting ourselves. When we have an NFT as an asset or as NFT as a security, how you go about buying them, they can be, if it's an asset, then it can be purchased on exchanges like OpenSea and others. That can be done. There's many ways that an NFT can actually be bought. If it's a security, that's a different story, and we probably should separate that question.
Okay. Well, it was exactly what you said there, and bringing up a little bit of what was brought up by Benjamin. So I'd like to ask Michael, how do you identify an NFT collection that you're interested in, and how do you kind of value that? How is a value identified? Michael is the only one who can't hear me, so just one moment while we fix that.
I'm happy to take the valuation question.
Yeah, if you could, and then hand that back off to Michael. Yeah. Let's get 2 perspectives.
Issue with my connection. So basically, how do you value? First, if you take an existing collection, if you want to know the price, there is the term we call the floor. So if you go on OpenSea, the floor is the price of the least expensive one. Just an FYI. But usually when you have a collection, let's say the Bored Ape Yacht Club, the most famous one, they have 10,000 different apes that you can choose from. And they have what we call rarity traits. And based on the scarcity, basically you have a different valuation. And you have some websites that are giving you the rarity score, like rarity.tools, and basically that allows you to see whether you rank against others. That's just monetary appreciation of the asset. But if you want to know why a collection is good, let's take, for example, the collection of the Bored Apes. So the Bored Apes have been, created like 8 months ago. They're worth, I think, between $6 to $7 billion today if you were to buy all of them. The cheapest is 100 Ether, so around $350,000. But what do you have for this? You actually have the full IP rights of those apes. So let's say that tomorrow I have one ape. You might not see it. It's on my watch here, for example. It's a bowler hat. And this guy, everybody in the space knows it's a Bored Ape. It's like if I was, a character in Star Wars. You see the character, it's them, right? So basically, I own the full rights of it, which means that if tomorrow I open a shop with this ape and I print, merchandise and mugs and T-shirts and whatever, I actually own a full rights, and I don't need to give a dime, any royalty to any other brands, because I own the full IP. So one of the most important things to appreciate in a collection is that do you own the IP when you buy the NFT? I'm not talking about the IP of the brand, but the IP of the exact NFT that you're buying. So that's one thing. Second thing is the utility in having it. It can be an art piece. There's no utility besides hanging it on a wall or on a metaverse, right? Or on your profile, whatever. But there is utility if it's a marketing tool. What utility it can be, like the same thing you used to receive in your emails. It could be access to a private sale, dinner with the founders of the company. It could be discounts for anything. Basically, all the marketing tactics that you're usually giving away in a different form, you can give it away through the NFT. So if a project has no utility, has no artistic value, then you might not want to go there. Some of the latest trends is actually the utility in the gaming space. So you might want to buy a character of a potential movie or a game that you will be able to use and leverage once the metaverse is built with the game that is linked to it. So you basically buy a character like you would buy an item in a game. So basically, utility is the key thing. If it's not for art, that's the short answer.
Okay. Well, thank you, Michael. Jim, before we move on, I'd like to get your perspective on how NFTs are valued.
Well, valuation in any asset or security is sometimes, in the eyes of the beholder. And in fact, there's a lot of traditional valuation techniques that can go into an NFT, which I really think should be called NFA, non-fungible assets, instead of non-fungible tokens. So it's like any other piece of art or security or whatever it happens to be asset. What are the features? What are the benefits? What are the rights that have been conveyed? So it's really difficult to say what it is. And if you took one piece of art, you may have an appreciation that says, I think it's worth $100,000, and you're willing to pay that. I may be willing to pay $500. Who's right? Who's wrong? There's a lot of emotion that drives pricing in the NFT space. So there's not a simple, easy answer. If you break it down into a traditional aspect, will it retain value? Does it have traditional valuation? Does the underlying asset that was before an NFT, in some cases, have value, which may or may not be true? So if there is a bubble, I think NFTs will be like any other asset class. There'll be a flight to quality. And if it had value before as an asset, it'll have value as an NFT afterwards. So there's some of the things that Michael mentioned too, scarcity, et cetera, all play into this. We actually conducted a valuation for an NFT as a security, and I can tell you it's not an easy exercise. So you go through a lot of subjective decisions on what makes a valuation. Usually the group that's most interested in the valuation, at least in the United States, would be the IRS. So they're very interested in what the valuation is.
Thank you, Jim. Devika, coming back to you, when we look at, you've mentioned before that what you get in an NFT depends on what the creator gave you. However, there's IP rights that we've discussed a few times. So can you expand about how IP rights are going to be included with this, but also how digitization of works can create value as well?
Sure, absolutely. So I think it'd be helpful to back up a little bit and just talk about what IP rights are involved, right? You've got the actual, what I talked about before, the copyright, the thing that can only be copied, displayed, distributed, that bundle of rights that comes with copyright. We've also got the branding, and I think Michael Lamar talked about that, and others, that brands are often depicted as part of an NFT, but that's a separate IP right. So there's the copyright in the thing that you have taken a picture of or that you've turned into an NFT, and then there's the brands that are displayed. There could even be, I think Michael Lamar also talked about patents, or maybe Ben was talking about patents. There'd also be underlying IP and how the NFT was created. I think what's most probably salient to what you're talking about as far as digitization of a work, it's how that relates to the trademark rights and the copyright in that underlying work, right? If I'll say it, somebody asked about Nike, I think it's ShockX, like the fight that's going on there, or the Tarantino fight that's happening with Miramax, because the fight really is about you as the owner of the underlying work, that physical work, that screenplay, that tennis shoe. You have certain rights, copyrights, trademark rights that go with that. I, as an NFT creator, may have a right to take a picture of that as what we call an ownership receipt to go sell the underlying shoe. I do have that right. That's considered okay. But when I turn that into an NFT, the question is now have I started to depreciate or to negatively affect the value of the underlying work, or unfairly trade on the value of the underlying work by making an NFT and selling it as a separate asset? And I like that, Jim. I like that it's non-fungible asset, right? Not just a token, in a way that I shouldn't be able to do because that bundle of rights that I just talked about wasn't given to me by the owner, Nike, for example, in the tennis shoe. Same thing with the Miramax and the Quentin Tarantino situation. He owns the rights in the screenplay. Miramax says they own the rights in the branding of Pulp Fiction and the way it looks. And so he can't sell his NFT with the screenplay in a way that infringes on their trademark rights. And so that's the kind of debate you get into. So the physical work could be adversely impacted or unfairly leveraged in digitization if the rights aren't flowed through. And that's why, it's important, if you want to have an NFT that you can do whatever you want with, create merchandise, that you understand what you're buying when you buy it on OpenSea or any of the marketplaces that are out there.
Okay, thank you, Devika. So Benjamin, you went through a number of types of NFTs out there. When you're looking beyond art, what other types of NFTs are you most excited about? You've mentioned royalties. Is there anything beyond that?
Well, basically any asset on the planet can be turned into you want to sell part of a building, you can do that as an NFT. And I think I'd like to make this important point. When you think about crypto, everyone talks about like the price of crypto, like Bitcoin is whatever, $30,000 today or whatever. But the price actually doesn't matter because the Bitcoin itself is divisible. So you could buy 0.000001 Bitcoin. Okay, NFTs are not divisible. They represent something. Now they can be bundled in a way that they appear divisible because you have a larger bundle that can, like for example, a video game that has lots and lots and lots of other NFTs that kind of aggregate into one unit. But that's a different level of token that then combines all of these other tokens. But an NFT by itself is a non-divisible asset. It's not just a non-fungible asset. And by fungibility, you mean, are they interchangeable? $1 is interchangeable with another. But if people actually cared about the serial number on a dollar, like collectors do, I've seen, for example, people on auctions talking about, oh, this has 4 zeros in a row, or this has 3 A's in it. Oh, this is really exciting. And so the individual characteristics of $1 makes it no longer fungible. That's what makes it unique. And there's a separate market for it, right? When you're talking about like just the US dollar and like a normal bill that you would buy, if there's some anomaly to it, it becomes valuable for a different reason among collectors, right? It might be that it was cut incorrectly or the serial number is unique. And so then it takes on a different type of value, right? So basically any asset on the planet can be turned into an NFT. The examples that we've been using or that I've been using are examples of these kind of digital assets, right? But literally anything can be turned into an NFT. If you wanted to actually say that the digital rights to own this car actually is going to be going to be represented through this smart contract that then it creates this NFT, then people can buy the NFT and that represents the ownership of the car. And without doubt, obviously you have to have when you have some sort of ownership rights, you have to have some sort of way, some way for people to say, okay, yeah, we agree that you own this item and that there's certain rights come with it. So going back to the Devika's point of the rights that you own are what are given by the owner. If I say, yes, if you own this token, you have the right to drive my car off, then I could actually tokenize my car and make that something that I'm selling because it represents that car with certain mileage, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the characteristics of it. But pretty much anything on the planet, real estate, just like we have REITs, we have strips. You want to make an NFT representing a whole bunch of life insurance, a strip on a life insurance policy, that's right. Completely doable. Any financial asset can be digitized in this way, and it confers certain rights. And that's important to remember that it represents rights that if you want to enforce, you go to civil court through a tort in order to defend those, just like you would with a patent. So that's important to keep in mind. Hopefully that answers your question. I kind of covered a lot of ground there.
Well, we're covering a lot of ground here. We started with NFTs and we landed on all assets in the world. But keeping that going, one of the things that you expanded upon was securitization. I want to turn it over to Jim. How do you view securitization with NFTs in larger portfolios?
Well, Benjamin brought up good points. So securitization can be the pooling or merging of assets to create a financial instrument. So you can either waterfall something, you can create royalties, options. I mean, the word securitization is pretty broad, so it all depends on what the use case would be. So a royalty it could be a use case, a securitization, depending on how you structure it, et cetera. So it's a pretty broad word to try to define. If you're looking at it for pooling of assets, maybe it's the Bored Apes, that type of thing. There's options that you can do in that case. If you have really what I think a lot of people look at securitization is releasing the underlying value that's been locked up, right? Something it's been static, and how do you unlock that value? A museum is a perfect example. They have lots of art, they have lots of exhibits, they have all kinds of things that have value to it, but the only value they may be getting right now is somebody walking through the turnstile and paying a fee to walk around the museum and look at something. Whereas if they created NFTs for some of their art, they've effectively securitized and unlocked some of that liquidity or some of that value. And it also allows additional viewers and audiences around the world to enjoy that. So,
yeah. Michael, and I'll just chime in and say that securitization, I want to keep it for the lawyers who are listening. That's different than something being a security, right? Like when Jim is talking about securitization, he is not necessarily talking about turning a security, which is the debate I deal with all the time.
Devika, if I could, just because you're a lawyer, can you also define smart contract versus contract? There's some confusion amongst people, I'm sure.
Sure. So I will say what makes a smart contract is it doesn't need me. Quite simply, it's a genius because it needs no lawyer. That's what makes it a smart contract, right? Typical contracts require you to do something, somebody else to do something, and some kind of intermediary in between, like sending something or whatever. That's a typical contract. The smart contract is self-executing. It needs no lawyer. It needs no middleman. It needs no clearinghouse. it puts a lot of people out of business. All these middle people, including me, go away. And because it's through the blockchain, it executes itself on both sides. Once the transaction happens, it's contracted and it's over.
But it needs auditors. It needs
it does need auditors. I agree. It absolutely needs auditors.
Because if a very, very famous hack, the DAO hack, happened because 2 lines of code were in the wrong order, just 2 lines. And that hack, if you put it in today's money, it's worth about $30 billion worth of ETH that was lost. So you need to have good people. And someone asked this question about how do you make money? Well, there's actually a huge amount of money to be made on just auditing code, because smart contracts are the foundational piece that provides for the minting and other things that are going to be made into these smart contracts. So
fantastic. So Michael, once again, I'm trying to get you to kind of reset for everyone. One of the things that's been talked about is the metaverse. I'm using you to define it. Can you tell us what the metaverse is and how NFTs factor into this? Yep.
Okay, sorry, there's a lag. I can't hear your question. So, metaverse. What is the metaverse? It's the next step for NFTs, right? So, again, you buy art, you buy an avatar. Where do you display it? You can do it like me on my watch. You can do it on your Samsung TV frame. But that's it. It's limited, right? So, metaverse, if you think Second Life is not that new, the big difference is that now it's based on crypto and blockchain, which means that there is a business model that is inherent to it. So it's a virtual world, basically, that you can access with or without glasses, and that allows you to buy the lens like you would do in real life, to create a house like in real life, to create a show, a concert, to sell clothes, to do a shop inside of it. And you could unlock some of this potential because you have a special key. Those special keys could be basically NFTs. So when you think about it, there's different way of seeing the story. One way is saying, okay, now it's harder and harder, it gets harder and harder to do a new successful NFT collection. So people would design a nice rabbit and make it an NFT. But let's say, okay, I have this NFT, what I'm going to do with it right now? You're going to add a little bit of AI, artificial intelligence on top of it. It's another NFT that could be a brain that you put on top of your rabbit. And this gives the rabbit, exceptional abilities to go in different interoperable metaverses and be a character to play with this character in a game. But if you think about it, creating a game takes 2-3 years. It costs millions of dollars. So what is the actual story here is that people wanted to build a game in the metaverse. To do so, they sold you the characters in advance to finance it. It's a new crowdfunding. It could be done the same for movies. I think Matrix 7 is out, for example. You could pre-sell the characters of the movie before it finances the movie. And how it changes the game, as you know, it's very hard to make money on games. Less than 1% of the people actually buy digital goods. So what you can do now with crypto on this metaverse is that, let's say you buy a knife on Fortnite, but then there's a sword. You don't need a knife anymore. You could rent the knife, or you could resell it. And the creator, aka the game Fortnite, will keep getting a commission on every, successive sales. So here we're being a new business model where I don't lose my digital items when I don't use it anymore, and I can make revenue out of it. Actually, it can even increase in value because it will keep generating revenues. And you have games, and I'll finish with that today hires over 400,000 or 500,000 people, for example, in India, to actually entertain and what we call the play to earn, which allows people to mint actually the token of the game by doing the actions with this game. And it's now massive, and it's going to replace in a very, very short period of time all the gaming as we knew it. And by putting together those pieces of business models within the games for everyone, not only for the game maker, but also for the users of it.
Fantastic. Well, Ben, I want to turn it over to you with to expand upon that a little bit.
Sure. There's two important principles that I think are underappreciated by people who are just observing what's going on in the metaverse and in the blockchain space. Okay, the first is digital scarcity. Okay, so let's go back to a video game, whether it's a video game like Second Life or like World of Warcraft, right? The World of Warcraft actually had digital assets in that world. There were people who made characters who went into the mountains to dig digital gold, and then they would go on eBay and sell that digital gold to other people. Okay, there was a very robust market for this. In fact, when I talked about this in my class once, one of my students raised his hand and said, "Professor, I used to do that in high school as my part-time job. I would dig for gold. I would meet my manager in the digital world, give him my gold, then walk up and get cash from him, and then go out with my friends with my cash." Okay, so that world existed, and we already had a mechanism for buying and selling them because you had things like eBay. Okay, the issue is what was stopping a programmer who worked for World of Warcraft or Second Life or whatever from giving their friends a whole bunch of gold? Nothing. Right? And this is really, really important. There's actually two pieces to this. Okay, so the first one is digital scarcity. What Bitcoin did as the first implementation of blockchain is it basically created DRM without having proprietary DRM. So basically, if I give you a Bitcoin, it's irrevocably given to you. I can't just take it back. And I also can't make a copy of it before I give it to you and keep a copy for myself. Right? So this is essentially solving the Napster problem. I could make, if I had an MP3 of a Janet Jackson song or a Coldplay song or something like that, I could make hundreds of copies of it and give them to a whole bunch of people. Well, in the blockchain space, digital scarcity became feasible, where when I give you the Bitcoin, it's yours and it's irrevocable that I've given it to you. More importantly, I can't appeal to someone to get it back. And this is the second principle, which is what's called censorability, right? Or censorship resistance. In other words, the Robin Hood problem, okay? When you think of censorship, you usually think of governments censoring individuals. But in the blockchain space, censorship means, can someone, any actor, government, company, individual, interfere with the transaction of the bit between individuals? Okay, so think about Robin Hood with the GameStop scenario that happened recently, right? Where there was a bunch of trading going on, a lot of people really interested in GameStop, and then eventually the CEO of the firm came in and blocked all transactions and said, you can't actually buy anymore. They would allow you to sell, but they blocked it and they changed their conditions, right? So whether it is the CTO, whether it is AWS, or it is Mark Zuckerberg, or it is any number of other people who could interfere, including the government, okay? Censorship resistance means that an individual or a company could not interfere with that transaction, okay? So when you've got these two are really important building blocks, because otherwise, when you think about this example of Second Life, what's stopping a programmer who works for Second Life from giving their friend $1 billion in that world? This is not possible in the blockchain space. And so when you start to overlap cryptocurrencies and NFTs in this world, where they are defined, they're not replicable, they're not divisible, these types of things, now you actually start to take what was just normally a video game world, Minecraft, Second World, World of Warcraft, and into a whole new place. Digital scarcity and censorship resistance. These are key pillars of blockchain, and they're also very, very important parts of the NFT world.
Great. Well, as part of this growing business and combining NFTs and metaverses, New York Stock Exchange filed a trademark for trading NFTs today. So, Jim, can you comment about that and talk about how traditional exchanges and traditional exchanges and crypto exchanges might start embracing this product?
embracing NFTs.
And metaverse.
Well, you keep asking me two questions at the same time. So
I'm asking everybody two questions because there's a lot to cover. We got the best.
Let's take it from the exchange versus you're going to see the traditional exchanges getting much more involved in blockchain. They have and they've been trying a couple. It all depends on who it is. One particular exchange has had 3 failures, so they keep trying. The crypto crypto exchange have been much more savvy about how they're doing things, and they'll expand more into the metaverse activities a lot easier than the traditional players, just because the DNA of those particular exchanges. So, in my mind, you'll see a much faster adoption in the traditional or in the crypto exchanges and some of the digital exchanges versus the traditional. The traditional will just take a long time, and they'll get to a point where they just have to acquire some of these other exchanges, kind of in a typical structure. Will they start trading some of the instruments and the activities around metaverse? I think the answer is yes, but it's a timing issue. The biggest issue for most of the exchanges, I know I'm one of them. I'm also a securities person, so to me, it's the regulatory environment. And there's a lot of gray areas still, and Devika can bring this up a lot. I mean, she's sharper on it than I am, but there's a lot of unknowns still in the regulatory world that haven't been resolved. And look, we've been talking about STOs for 5 years, and within the SEC, there's still a lot of blank stares on that activity. A lot of issues still in custody. There's a transfer agent activity. There's still a lot of underlying infrastructure that is still not perfect, even at the digital security. So when you start looking at metaverse and some of the other newer instruments and activities, the answer is yes, they'll get to it, but I think it'll be slower for the traditional players than the crypto players.
Okay, great. Well, Devika, I want to ask a question from chat. Is the legal system ready, and can they handle everything that's coming up with NFTs?
The answer is no. So there you go. Are we done? No. So just to expand on that, I mean, just what Jim talked about is one of the reasons, right? Acronis, I know, sent a letter to the public letter, the SEC. A lot of people have been begging the SEC to please make it really clear when something like an NFT is going to be an asset that is a security, and when is it going to be not a security, right? A collectible, not a security. Something that for the Howey test, you expect to have somebody else make profit through their managing, that's a security. I tell the SEC, thank you for regurgitating the law to me. Can you please now answer my question? Which is, how do I tell the difference when I've got a collectible, like we just talked about, that has a royalty stream that may be managed by others, and so therefore I'm expecting profit? Is that now a security? So no, but I'm hoping that it starts coming. I think some of the lawsuits that I already kind of mentioned, the Nike lawsuit, the Quentin Tarantino Miramax fight, some of the other fights we're going to have where the court has to get involved. And I'm hoping that Congress then starts getting involved, because I love our IP laws. I'm an IP nerd. I love IP law, but it's just when you read some of the things, like even our old Copyright Act, it still talks about phono recordings. Right? Like it hasn't even gotten close to being able to deal with the metaverse. Like exactly what Bennett talked about. You've got a situation where somebody can steal by giving it to their friend, because in some ways I would feel like that's stealing. I work hard. I play video games. I work real hard to earn my knife in Fortnite. The fact that somebody else can just get it by pre-ordering kind of makes me upset, because I worked hard for that. But the law is not ready for that fight. The law says it's a video game. We don't regulate that in that way. It's not a theft. And so I think the legal system, through these fights, the courts are going to start making decisions, and then Congress is going to step in. And then I'm hoping then regulators like the SEC and others are going to step in and start giving us some answers where we really, really need them.
Can I add something to that?
Please.
I'm not sure we'll get answers in the timeliness that we all would like.
No.
So there'll be, a lot of unknowns going forward. And Devika's point about the Howey test and what's a security and what's an asset, there's a lot of gray area there, and you can trip up. And I would actually argue that if you take a kind of a real close look at it, and you took it to the letter of the law or the letter of the rules, you could see that there's somewhere close to 40% of all the NFTs issued are, in fact, securities. Okay. So, I mean, it was one of the reasons why we did an NFT as a security was to avoid the royalties and options issues that when we minted and issued it. Now, what will happen on retrofitting and all these other kinds of things? But you have a different administration with a different viewpoint on what it is, how to protect the investor. So I could see some draconian things happening, and I could also see some things not happening. But to me, if you really look at the rules, a lot of NFTs have been issued, and they're in the United States under U.S. rules would be deemed a security. Outside of the United States, they would not be deemed a security.
I'm chomping at the bit to get in here. Okay, so think about as a regulator, what does the SEC really care about? They care about when like your aunt and uncle start asking you about this stuff, and they start taking their money out of their retirement account to invest in Bitcoin and buy JPEGs of animals, right? That's when the SEC cares. They honestly don't really care when accredited investors who are supposed to be sophisticated investors lose their shirt, okay? They care when average moms and dads and aunts and uncles start to get hurt. Are we at a point where you have these digital assets that are trading thousands of times a month on open exchanges and saying, well, they're not technically securities.
Right.
Well, isn't it just creating the froth that scares people? The fear of missing out is what compels people to do things that they would not normally do. This is why, for example, I don't know if you've ever been to a real auction. I'm from the Midwest. So I've been to lots of auctions where the auctioneer is like, hey, 45, and like getting you excited about the auction. And then suddenly you pay $150 for something that when you had a clear head was only worth $25 because you kind of get sucked into the rhythm of it. These exchanges, what's happening right now is, even though these assets they don't necessarily meet the Howey test. And the question is what constitutes work in a common enterprise in order to be able to say that these are assets. This is all very technical jargon about what the Howey test is. But I believe that the SEC is going to be really, really thinking hard about at what point, when something is traded actively in the market, do we actually say it is a security instrument, right? I think this is a really important point. And we know that Gary Gensler not only used to work at an investment bank and was very successful at that, he actually used to teach a blockchain and crypto course at MIT prior to his current position. So he's a very sophisticated thinker about this space, and it may lead to new guidance about what we actually consider. Right now, we're relying on something that was literally decided based off of an orange orchard case back almost 100 years ago to make sense of a market that is frothy, that is pulling in grandmothers. Literally, one of my students just a couple of days in class said, my grandmother asked me about how she can buy Bitcoin. And when this starts to happen, the SEC starts to go, wait a minute, maybe this is getting out of control. So I anticipate that we're going to see a lot of guidance about what constitutes a security. And I think it will actually redefine that it's not just the Howey test. That's my prediction. But enough pontificating.
Just for everybody who's wondering, the Howey test is the famous SEC rule for how we determine a security. It's an investment with the expectation of profit, primarily from the work of others. So if you're doing that, you likely have a security, though we don't have a lot of clarity in the digital space or the crypto space on what is and isn't a security.
So when someone really famous goes out onto TV and starts to plug a digital asset, is that not work? You're relying on the work of people going out based off of an investment thesis, going on a CNBC and talking about the valuation of these assets, this definition of work really matters. Because if it is work, you're talking about security, and what you're doing is manipulating the market, right? And so this starts to create a whole bunch of new liabilities for people. And certainly what's going on in this frothy market is going to have the attention of the SEC. But it's hard to say exactly what is what right now. And I agree with all the panelists on that point.
So we've been talking a lot about the United States and the challenges faced by the regulatory regimes here. I want to turn it over to Mike really quick about what's going on in Europe.
Yes, so actually in Europe and specifically in France, we get lucky to have actually, I don't think it's pure luck, by the way, but we have three worldwide leaders. One is Ledger. It's this what we call the cold wallet. It's kind of a USB key that allows you to secure your NFT or your crypto. And I think they have like 80%, 90% market share and a very profitable company. We also have SoRare. If you like soccer, and they're going to do other sports, I invite you to have a look. It's like those Panini albums when we were getting when we were young with the stickers, right, and collections. Actually, they transform it as an NFT, and you can buy the sticker of the players. And not only you can collect them, but each week when there is a game in real life, your team based on the stickers you got would actually get a notation, and based on that, there is a gamification, and you can earn more cards or rewards. This company raised over $600 million in March, and after, I think, in 2 months, they did over $120 million in revenues. So numbers are pretty insane. They were a team of 15 people. And the third company is Sandbox, which is one of the two largest metaverses. So if some of you want to have a chance to come to Europe or want an excuse, I'm hosting this Paris Blockchain Week Summit and Paris NFT Day, and happy to welcome you. You'll be able to meet over 2,500 people and have the best speakers in the space discuss it.
Fantastic. Well, we're getting pretty close to the end, so I do want to encourage people to jump into the Q&A. Devika, I'm going to ask you a question about that I saw in the QA. How is real estate in the metaverse how is that being issued, and what's going on there?
So, I'm sure people have been reading in the news about folks paying $10,000 for a plot of land, and they're building, right, their spot. It's exactly what Ben was talking about, right? In that it is replicating what we do in the real world. Though it's just a digital game, I still have to buy property in this code that somebody puts in that this is Devika Kornbacher's. This is my metaverse real estate. And then I have to either go earn or make, if there's mods, because I love games that allow modding. If mods I'm allowed to make a mod, then I can make my house to put right there. And that it's just like actual real estate. It's going to appreciate, because as I make my house right here, if Domino's, just going to go there, or Pizza Hut builds a pizza place next to me, and pizza gives you some special power like the AI rabbit to do things within the game, whether it's Decentraland or wherever else, Second Life, whatever it is, then being the house here and being able to collect the first and the freshest pizza that gives me more points is going to be valuable. So real estate is real in the metaverse. And so I'll say I'm one of those folks who's jumping in with both feet to say, I want my plot of land. It's, if you want to talk about it too, it's also happening in the real world with physical assets and fractionalization of real estate. But I know we don't have time, Michael, to go into that, so I won't even. But I'll just throw that out there just to throw a bomb. That fractionalization, fractional investments in real estate is also a big thing in the real world that folks are talking about.
Well, you have real estate NFTs for real estate purposes. I'm working on 3 projects. You can actually sell the keys of a condominium, of a building, instead of the actual condos as your act. I mean, there's going to be the thing that we're scratching the surface on, and what I believe we're in the first inning on, is the financial instrument innovation. We're going to go around NFTs and NFAs. Collectibles are fine. A lot of the things, there's going to be some use cases, that are going to be applied across, but we're scratching the surface on what's going to happen in the financial community.
That's everything in the world plus all new value that's created in the digital space. And this is,
Yes.
this point of, yeah, we can tap into this value that's been locked up. That's in the tangible world. But one of the most amazing things just think about art. When you have creative thing, the mere act of taking a piece of paper and scribbling on it, okay, this act of enactment actually creates new value in the world that didn't exist before. And if there's willingness to pay for that, okay, my art, probably not. But if my name was Pablo Picasso, you might actually want just that scribble, or you might want just a signature on a baseball. If it's the right person, it takes on value, right? And so the fact that you're going to have digital scarcity and non-censorship opens the door for the creation of tremendous value in the digital space. This is this idea of having this digital land. Well, where did it come from? Well, it's actually a finite digital object that was created that people can own. Instead of it being an NFT, it's like this flat thing. And then you can go in there with your VR goggles and you can play around in the space and you can build. In fact, there was just an arrest in Russia, a prosecution in Russia that came out in the news today that these young men had built a digital building in Minecraft and were planning to bomb it, and were prosecuted in Russia and sent to 5 years in prison for what they considered to be training in terrorism. The building did not exist in the real world. But this young man who did this, actually, the government mapped that onto a reality and said, what you're doing is training for terrorism, and they're going to send him to a Siberian prison for 5 years. This is where this world, the different world, starts to interact with the real world.
So, not to end on a low note, but let's go ahead and ask everybody at the panel, what is your biggest concern with this market? I'm going to start with Mike.
Biggest concern, you see, is how long will it take to onboard my mom to NFTs? I mean,
that's exactly my concern, actually.
We're
on the opposite side.
I mean, it's still, you need to create an account with crypto exchange and to send your Ether to a MetaMask wallet to connect to your OpenSea, to perhaps have to swap it to West and not to East, and it's still so cumbersome. So hopefully, a Coinbase is going to open their NFT wallet soon, so people who already have crypto will have an easy access to the NFTs. But I'm talking mass market. We don't know. So if it takes 3 or 4 years, it will slow down the industry for sure, because now the industry has been driven in the majority because of people who hold crypto. We don't know the numbers, but it might be 70, 80, or 90% of the volumes are made by people who got cheap crypto. And if we're not successful in onboarding my mom, then it will take more time for the industry to take off and to see real use cases.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Ben, same question. What's your biggest concern other than onboarding Mike's mother?
Yes. No, I mean, technology has a way of outpacing our conversations about morality and philosophy and ethics. We've seen it over and over again. As the person who actually said, you can literally digitize everything on the planet, this is going to open up a larger conversation of, do we actually want to live in a world where everything is digitized, where everything becomes the basis of a transaction? But our entire relationship with the world is through a transaction of moving things between people, whether it's in a digital world representing the real world or whatever. This is a profound different way of thinking about the world, that everything on the planet is now a property. This starts to take us back to old philosophies about John Locke, and whether or not you've actually done work in the natural world, and that gives you the right to claim certain things as property. These are big questions, and I think as a society, it's very exciting to look at the money that can be made And we also need ethicists and philosophers and open conversations among people who are designing the institutional breaks on things to say, okay, how do we think about this? Do we want this world? And I think that's a really important, panels like this are exactly the type of event that we need in order to open that conversation up broadly.
Okay. Yeah, unfettered capitalism can be a pretty scary thought when you put it in those terms, Ben. Devika, same question. What's your biggest concern?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I do have several, but I'll pick my biggest one. I think is that this digital world that Ben's talking about, that Michael's talking about, we're going to carry the same ails, and I think here's my concern, is we're going to carry the same ails. I'm going to say it: the racism. You talked about morality, Ben. Like all the problems of this world, I think are going to carry into the metaverse. I think the concern I have is that it's going to be under this guise of fairness. Just to be candid, right? Like because it's decentralized, because no one's in control, that we somehow it's okay because it's no one's fault. So it's okay that there's an underclass now being developed of those who can't buy cryptocurrency. It's okay that there's land in metaverses where people of a certain color aren't, because that's just the metaverse. It's not real. So my biggest concern is that we're going to carry the same ills, but under the guise of it's okay because it's decentralized and it's no one's fault.
Devika, not that I'm going to add more, but your concern is borne out a little bit. Crypto punks, the female punks are valued lower, and the darker skinned punks are lower than the white skinned punks, even the albino skin. So there's some evidence to that, though we can't say definitively right now. Jim, your biggest concern?
Well, like Devika, I have a lot. I have 3 quick ones. What happens when we have a market crash and what results from that? Maybe the worst thing is bad regulation versus no regulation. And what's going to happen when we have either lack of or standardization? Does that help or hinder the growth of this market?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to close it with my concern, and it might echo a little bit of everyone's. We're creating a brand new world, and we're bringing with it the preconceived conceptions we had, though. I would be very concerned if we reflect the world we have in all the inequality, and it could very quickly exasperate it, especially with the transactional value of everything happening here. So, let's all remember that we can make a lot of money, we can make a lot of new value, but let's try to change the world for the better. I want to thank the panel, everyone here, and we're going to go ahead and turn it over back to David, I think, and let's go ahead and do that. And you probably hear my dog coming in here now, so it's perfect timing.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you to all our panelists. What an interesting discussion. Particular thanks to OLB Group and Rana Yaka for sponsoring the program, and of course, to our great friends at Fordham's Gabelli School of Business. I can just tell all of you that in the nonprofit museum world, as was alluded to by Jim, that the gold rush is definitely being contemplated, including by our museum, to mint some NFTs. So stay tuned for that. And then lastly, don't forget our gala is coming up, the museum's 2022 gala, March 7th. Please go to our website to take a look for information about that. Again, many thanks to Michael Maloney and all our panelists, and we'll see you at our next museum event.